Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at CatherineCarrigan.com and UnlimitedEnergyNow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, we have a great show for you today because we are going to be talking about natural healing for anxiety. Our guest today is Emily Shapiro. Emily Shapiro is a life coach, Reiki master, crystal practitioner, and her primary emphasis is she is an anxiety relief coach. You can find out more about Emily Shapiro and her wonderful work at her website, living-beyondwellness.com. Welcome, Emily Shapiro.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Happy to be here.
So, Emily Shapiro, we're here today to share with our audience around the world how to heal anxiety naturally. So, first of all, let's start by talking about what exactly is anxiety. What happens when someone feels anxious? What's going on?
Yeah, so anxiety is defined as an intense and persistent feeling of worry and fear, feelings of doom. There are associated symptoms. Everyone responds differently, but they can be anywhere from rapid heart rate, rapid breathing, or a feeling of not being able to get enough air in, tightness in the chest, difficulty with concentrating, trembling, sweating. It just, in the dictionary under anxiety, it should just say very uncomfortable for anxiety, just the uncomfortable.
Great explanation. And I'm going to share some of my experience also from my 29 years as a medical intuitive healer. And the way that I look at a person, a human, is what I refer to as the 5 levels of healing: your physical body, your energy system, your emotions, your mind, and your soul. So from my point of view, when I'm doing a medical intuitive reading with somebody who is tending to anxiety, these are some of the things that I find. At the nervous system level, and you have a nervous system, nerves, right? And you have 2 parts, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So what I find is that when people have anxiety, they're usually stuck in the sympathetic nervous system. And you may want to relax, but you're not able to do so. Also on a physical level, so you're basically, when we're stuck in the sympathetic nervous system, our stress hormones, our cortisol and adrenaline are just, out of control. On a physical level, we can have low levels of gamma aminobutyric acid, which is a neurotransmitter that helps you be calm. On an energetic level, when we're anxious, we're typically disconnected from the earth. We're not grounded. We're not breathing, and we'll talk about that a lot. So again, our breath is not full and deep, and that's affecting our nervous system. On an emotional level, typically what's happening is a lot of, and this is emotional and mental, there's a lot of circular thoughts. So we're caught in these thought loops, like, don't forget the milk, don't forget the milk, don't forget the milk. On a mental level, we're usually stuck in the left side of the brain. So there's a lack of brain integration. So we're not using our whole brain. And on the spiritual level, we may not feel safe. And there may be good reasons we may not feel safe, right? Based on where we're living, on what's happening. We may not have fully accepted our incarnation in our body in this lifetime. So those are some things that I find going on frequently. And did I mention on the physical level, a lot of times there's blood sugar imbalances, because every time your blood sugar drops, your stress hormones spike, and then you feel anxious. So there's a lot of things that go along with anxiety. So I'm really glad that we started by talking about what is anxiety, because it's not just one thing. It really does affect all 5 levels of our.
Absolutely.
Now, Emily Shapiro, I know that part of why you are so successful as an anxiety relief coach is that you have healed this in yourself.
Yeah.
How has anxiety affected your life?
Yeah, I had quite a wrestle with it many years ago when I was a senior in college. Toward the end of the last semester, I started having panic attacks out of nowhere. And I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know what they were. I didn't have words to put to the experience. And I had orchestrated 2 interviews in New York City for 2 days after graduation, just shifting very quickly from one to the other. And I was living in the suburbs of New York City at the time. And I was on a packed Manhattan bound commuter express train and had a panic attack of a lifetime. It was like I was out of my skin.
Mm.
And thankfully I was with my sister who happened to be working in this city. So we were traveling down together that morning. And I had her go and find the conductor and have this train rerouted to a local stop
Mm.
so that I could get off the train. I was 21 at the time. And I just remember standing on that platform after we exited the train. And of course, there was no one there because no one else was getting off at that time. And it was just totally surreal. Like, what the heck is going on here? And what am I going to tell my parents and my friends and my family? I didn't make it to the interviews, and it just kept spiraling from there. The anxiety continued, the panic attacks continued, and I was really lost. This was a time that was, it was the mid 90s, so the internet was really in its infancy. And so I felt very alone. I felt very hopeless. I felt helpless. I didn't have tools to work with it. And I was lucky enough to come across a book that spoke much of anxiety and panic attacks specifically. And I learned that though I was a very capable person and a very independent person, that this kind of thing can still happen. And thankfully, the author's information was in the back of the book, and I dialed direct. I called her immediately, and she was actually running a program for relief from anxiety herself. And so I started working with her for a few months, and step by step, through the principles that she was teaching me and the confidence that I was gaining from working with her, I was able to move forward. And so I went out and I got a job in a hospital emergency department because, of course, that's low stress and low octane environment for someone recovering from anxiety. But as a side note, I also have Crohn's disease and had been in and out many hospitalizations and surgeries and what have you. So it was super meaningful to me to be in that environment and to give back. And so, but in conjunction during all of those years, I actually stayed in the emergency department for 21 years. And during that time, I continued to study all that I could find on anxiety, how it affects the mind, how it affects the body, and also sunk my teeth into energy medicine. I very much come from a perspective of very black and white. It's either yes or no. And I was really craving that gray matter in the middle, some freedom, and the energy healing really spoke to me with Reiki and crystal healing and sound healing and forest bathing and tapping, the emotional freedom technique. I started learning all of these modalities and applying them to myself and found it incredibly helpful. And so, through my own personal experiences as well as my studies, I put together a program that's specifically designed for finding relief from anxiety and guiding clients back to peace and confidence and freedom.
Now, Emily Shapiro, anxiety relief coach, why do you think it's important to address both the mind and the body when it comes to anxiety?
Yes, yes, I feel very strongly about that because anxiety isn't just an experience in the mind or just an experience in the body. Of course, it's both, and both work off of each other, the chicken or the egg kind of a thing. And as you were mentioning, when we have anxiety, stress hormones are released from our adrenal glands and they can linger in our system for a while. And so, the antidote to that is to sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. That if the anxiety is still coursing through your system, the stress hormones still coursing through your system, the anxiety will more readily reappear or escalate even higher. So while you're working with the tools on the mental plane, it's important to quiet the rest of the system so that it doesn't jack up the mind again in that whole cyclical situation.
Fabulous. So we're in total agreement. So in this radio show, I want to share for free for our audience some things that you and I have both discovered from our years of experience about actually works for healing anxiety.
Mhm.
So I'm going to and this is Cliff Notes version.
Yes.
All right. So when I'm working with someone with anxiety, one of the first things that I want to do is balance their blood sugar. I always joke the key to life is to balance your blood sugar because, first of all, hormones are some of the biggest drivers of our behavior in our body. And in the body, you have major hormones, and the major hormones are insulin and your adrenaline and cortisol, your stress hormones. The hormone that you have the most control over is actually your insulin because you decide what to eat and how to eat. So, so obviously there's many details to this, but the first thing I'm going to do is balance their blood sugar. And because every time your blood sugar drops, your stress hormones are going to spike and you're going to feel panic. I'm going to address their diet. Caffeine will immediately put someone into stage 1 of adrenal stress. And a lot of people are very sensitive to caffeine and they don't even know it. And then you mentioned many of my clients as well who have chronic digestive disorders, their nervous system isn't balanced. So balancing the nervous system, starting at the physical level. So all the people with chronic Crohn's and colitis, you've got to go in and balance their nervous system because digestion is a parasympathetic process. So sometimes on the physical level, I may get my clients to take GABA, which is a natural healing remedy. It's an amino acid. It's also one of your neurotransmitters. So when you're anxious, you're usually low in GABA, and GABA is a supplement that you can easily take. On an energetic level, I'm going to use breath work with them because when you're using the breathing exercises, you're out of your story, which is often a big problem. I'm going to have them do grounding things like walk in nature or garden or walk barefoot, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, on an emotional level, there's a couple of flower essences that I find incredibly helpful. One of them is Star of Bethlehem, which is shock. So many of us may have had traumas in our life earlier on, and then you get stuck in the trauma. So Star of Bethlehem gets you, it's a Bach flower remedy. It helps you get out of shock. White chestnut Bach flower remedy is for people who have chronic repetitive thoughts. Their mind just runs too fast. And then there's a orchid healing remedy from the Living Tree Orchid Essences called Soul Shield Plus. And many of my clients are just highly sensitive people, and they're hypersensitive to the energy, emotions of people around them. So Soul Shield Plus basically protects your energy so that you stop reacting to everybody around you. On the mental level, what I find is that people who are in anxiety, they're stuck in the left side of the brain and they're not using their whole brain. So I'm going to give them directions on repatterning the brain so they can integrate the right and left hemisphere and use alternate nostril breathing, which also turns on both sides of the brain. And when you're in a panic attack and when you're feeling anxious, you're stuck in the left side of the brain, so you can't see that big picture. And then again, on the spiritual level, I'm going to do healing work with them to feel safe, feel safe to be in their body in this lifetime, and to fully accept their incarnation in this body in this lifetime. Now, Emily Shapiro, you are a Reiki master, and you use Reiki and energy healing to help support the release of anxiety. How does energy work support the release of anxiety?
Yeah, so when I use Reiki with my clients, what it's doing is it's giving them the opportunity to really calm their nervous system. We do a guided meditation. I start applying the Reiki energy. And again, like you're saying, it's an opportunity to stop with the stories, just kind of sink into the support of the table or the bed, wherever they're situated. And it gives the adrenals the opportunity to decrease their output of cortisol and stress hormones. And through the Reiki and relaxation, what I find is that, people will come to this session super stressed, and this is what's happening and really spinning, and the energy is really up. And then by the end of the energy session, the energy portion of the session, they're saying, I can't believe I was able to relax that much. That was better than a massage. Like, what did you do? Like, they're just really baffled, and they feel fortified in a way that they're able to take further steps forward in their healing or whatever they need to do that day. So yeah, it's super supportive of, like you're saying, with the nervous system and just bringing everything down. It also opens up opportunity for more clarity and more focus, and just better functioning as a whole, so to speak.
Yes, great explanation, Emily Shapiro. And I agree with you. And I feel that when we're using energy healing for relief from anxiety specifically, you're giving people a felt sense of this is what it actually feels like to feel relaxed. Because many people who've been anxious for years, they don't even know what that feels like.
Totally. Yeah.
Now, with that, let's take a break to listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio, and we'll be right back with more fabulous information from Emily Shapiro, anxiety relief coach. So Emily Shapiro, someone listening to this broadcast may say, okay, I suffer from anxiety, and I think it's very important for all of us to give literally away for free self-care tools, so that when it's 2 a.m. and you can't call your best friend, or you don't want to call your best friend, you can deal with what's coming up for you. How do you soothe yourself in a moment of anxiety?
So first and foremost, I find that it's important to bring the mind back to the present. Anxiety is often future-based, and anything that can bring us back to the present moment, even just looking around the room, like white lampshade, red picture frame, just naming things right in your environment will stop the stories and really bring you into not just the present moment, but your immediate environment. And also what I call the so what and allow principles. And that is that when we have anxiety, there's so much what if this, and then what if that, and so on and so on. And our fabulous imaginations take off, and we're off to the races kind of thing. And so the antidote to what if is so what. Whatever your what if is, fill in the blank. So what? It feels a little strange at first because it is such like a high adrenaline fear, but the so what really helps to take the power away from the what ifs. And then the second portion of that is allowing. And important to say that to allow these sensations to wash through your system is completely counterintuitive to what your mind is saying, what your body is saying. It's like everything in your system is like, no, I must fight this. I have to hold on. I have to resist this and brace myself. But in actuality, it's when we allow the sensations to move through that they have the opportunity to do so, and they actually do go on their way. And I remember years ago employing this for the first time. And I thought, with the woman that I was working with, I was like, she's out of her mind. I can't do that. It's so frightening to allow that intense wave of energy move through my body. But I got to a place where I was so uncomfortable that I was willing to give it a try. And the wave came, and I won't lie, it was very uncomfortable, but I do also have to say it washed through and it washed out. And from having that first experience of really letting go in the moment and allowing it to move through, that's exactly what happened. So those are a couple of things that I throw in. And also, if you're in a space where you can get up and move around a little bit, not always possible, but if you are, you see like runners before a race or a swimmer and they're shaking it off, they're moving their limbs and stepping foot to foot. It's just, there's so much energy coursing through our system and the energy wants to move. So if you're able to just shake it out a little bit, that can be really helpful as well. Also like when you observe animals having a tussle, so to speak, they finish their tussle and then they shake it off and you see them just kind of gently walk away. So it's that idea of just allowing the energy to move through and shake it off and find some peace from there.
Great, excellent suggestions. So here's some other suggestions that sort of follow along with that.
Mhm.
And, we want to have a lot of compassion because, as you mentioned, anxiety is an incredibly uncomfortable feeling.
Mhm.
I remember one time I was premenopausal, so my hormones were super low, and I was getting on the interstate here in Atlanta where I live, and there was a lot of traffic, and I had to get from all the way over to the right to all the way over on the left, crossing 7 lanes of traffic in one in one interchange, and I had a panic attack. And you just feel completely out of body, right? Your heart is racing and so on.
Mhm.
So here is an exercise similar to what Emily is talking about, because so many of us, we turn to self-medicating in ways that are really unhelpful: drugs, alcohol, overeating, etc. So a couple of things. This is very, very interesting. So on the tip of your tongue, the very tip of your tongue, there's an acupressure point that corresponds to your amygdala. Now, what is your amygdala? You actually have 2 amygdalae in your brain. If you go above your ears into the brain about 2 inches, you've got 2 amygdalae on both sides of the brain. And the way I like to explain your amygdalae is that they're like the control towers at the airport. So the control tower at the airport goes, okay, plane here, you're going to go to runway A, and plane B, you're going to go to runway B. And the amygdalae direct energy in the brain. And when we are threatened, when we go into fight, flight, or freeze, the amygdalae direct the energy to the back of the brain, the reptilian brain, where you're in fight, flight, or freeze. When you are in fight, flight, or freeze, you're not able to access your reasoning. So I can remember being there, and I lived here, for decades, and all of a sudden I'm lost, like 5 minutes from my house, right? You're not able to access your wisdom, your knowledge. When you're calm, the amygdalae direct the energy to the front of the brain where you can think logically. So how do you use the amygdalae? Well, again, many people who are overeating to calm themselves, what you literally do is drink water. So simply drinking water stimulates that acupuncture point on the tip of your tongue, and it can start to calm you. And drinking water also takes the tension out of your nervous system. And then I want to follow up with a yoga exercise based on what Emily Shapiro was talking about, because it takes tremendous courage sometimes to feel our feelings, right? To feel the depths of our sorrow, the depth of our rage, the depth of our anxiety, and it can be extremely intense. So there's a yoga exercise called the container exercise. So if you're someone who suffers from anxiety, this is something you can do to self-soothe in any moment. So first step is you realize, oh, I'm starting to feel anxious. Those emotions are starting to come up. Second step is you choose for yourself a container. Now, this is a container that you're going to fill up with your feelings. So it could be a little dainty teacup. It could be a dumpster, like the city puts trash in. So you notice the emotions are coming up. You choose a container in your mind, and this is just an inner picture that you have in your mind. And then you give yourself permission to feel the feelings just long enough that you fill up that container. So I fill up my teacup, or I fill up the density dumpster, and then you empty the container. You imagine yourself pouring the tea out, burying the garbage. And then, as Emily says, then you change the channel. You get up and you do something different. You call a friend, you go for a walk, you change the channel on the TV, you do something entirely different, so that you're literally changing your perspective and shifting your focus.
Yeah, love that. Definitely.
So how is setting boundaries associated and helpful for people with anxiety?
Yeah, this is a good one. And I didn't always associate boundaries with anxiety issues, but that whole notion of not living from your truth, doing things you don't want to be doing on a regular basis. And I don't mean like doing the dishes, but spending time with certain someones that aren't a healthy fit for you, not drawing limits with people. They're making you feel uncomfortable in certain ways and you're not speaking up for yourself. A byproduct of that, unfortunately, can be anxiety. And anxiety is a signal to say something needs to shift here. And your body's kind of like, well, let me help you out here because you're not listening to the internal compass. So I'm going to knock at your door and I'm going to speak a little bit louder and a little louder until I get your attention. That change is necessary here. And it's that idea of being in alignment with yourself. And of course, it's like the next thing to say is, yes, but it's anxiety provoking to set boundaries with other people. And I would agree with that completely. Likely you're saying something to them that they don't want to hear. But the consequence of not speaking up for yourself, not drawing those boundaries, is that you can end up having a lot of anxiety, being out of alignment with yourself. So I've associated that and brought that into my practice as well. Super helpful.
That's excellent. So Emily Shapiro, anxiety relief coach, how do you recommend that people suffering from anxiety set healthy boundaries? How do we, in your professional view, how can we do that better?
Well, I think that first and foremost, we're often not even aware that we don't have boundaries where we need them. And so I feel that just sitting down and getting clear about where we feel uncomfortable, where are we not being our authentic self? Where do we not feel comfortable being our authentic self? What are those places or areas or people that do cause us to feel anxious inside? And to start pinpointing those realms, and from there getting more clear about what does feel safe for you. If you did have the courage to step forward and set that boundary, what would it look like? And just kind of taking it step by step until you're very clear about what's best for you. And then creating a dialogue within yourself of how you want to express that to the other person. And then just building that confidence and being able to step forward and share your truth and set that boundary and limit with another person.
Great advice. And here's some perspective from my work as a medical intuitive healer. I think it's really helpful. Let me just step back for a moment. So when we think about natural healing, we think about yoga and meditation and breath work and natural healing remedies. But we forget that our environment is the most powerful factor. So, for example, you mentioned that when you had your first major panic attack, you were on the subway in New York, which for anybody who's ever been in the subway in New York, especially at rush hour, we can understand how that might have happened, right? All the people, everybody's packed in, there's no personal space. So I think that from my perspective, as a medical intuitive healer, you have to look at the concept of triggers. So what is a trigger? The trigger is any place or person or situation that pulls up really intensely uncomfortable feelings in you. Okay. So for example, you might feel totally calm and then go to the doctor to get your blood pressure checked. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, having racing thoughts and racing heart rate and so on. Or you could be totally comfortable with yourself and calm, and then you have to go deal with family members that you haven't resolved your issues with. So from my perspective, as a medical intuitive healer, I want to identify or work with my clients to identify what their triggers are. And triggers are also very, very interesting because especially if someone has experienced trauma in their life, it could be a smell. Like when I was, 4 years old and being raped, there was these smells going on. So it could be shapes of buildings, it could be temperature, it could be many, many things. So we want to identify, number one, what are our triggers so that you can be aware. Like I'm going to the doctor, maybe I need to have a little bit more self-care while they're taking my blood pressure. And secondly, once you identify your triggers, you want to identify or work with a practitioner to find what are the emotions that these triggering events are pulling up. So it's pulling up my anger, it's pulling up my resentment, it's pulling up the fact that I don't feel in control. So really identifying your triggers and identifying how those environment, people, or situations are pulling up unresolved emotions in you. So any comments about that, Emily Shapiro?
I completely agree. And that cascade effect from these very minor triggers can be quite something. But I would just tack on to that there is also a comfort in once we identify triggers and we're able to understand that cascade effect, that there is certainly a lot of self-empowerment that comes from that, just being settled in just connecting the dots, so to speak, that even just having that mental logic that, I'm not crazy, I'm not going crazy, that can be super helpful too.
Yeah, I know that when I first moved to Atlanta, I'm from Savannah, Georgia. And in Savannah, everybody drives 35 miles an hour. There's 2 lanes of traffic. And then I go to Atlanta and there's 7 lanes of traffic and everybody's weaving in and out and going all different speeds. And I just really had a hard time and would feel quite anxious on the interstate. So I realized driving on the interstate is a trigger for me. So I would start to listen to calming music when I was driving. Right?
Perfect. Yeah.
So with that, let's take a break and then come back for more wonderful information from Emily Shapiro, Anxiety Relief Coach. Hang in there and we'll be right back. So Emily Shapiro, Anxiety Relief Coach, why do you feel that self-compassion is so important when we're coming to heal anxiety?
Yeah, this is a toughie, and total transparency, I definitely still work on this on a regular basis. Not so easy. And in particular, when dealing with anxiety, it's our natural inclination to be very angry that we're having this experience. It's extraordinarily uncomfortable. It may be keeping us from what we want to be doing, what we need to be doing. It's really a loaded and intense experience. And some people can even bring it a step further of not just being angry about their situation, but turning it inward, turning it on themselves. Why can't I make this go away? Why can't I X, Y, or Z? attaching adjectives about themselves that aren't accurate out of frustration for their situation. And so I like to say that you can't like shame or bully yourself out of anxiety, and that it's actually the kindness and compassion and self-support that helps to bring everything down and then open the gate to being able to move through the anxiety experience. And it's like, if we could only be as kind to ourselves as we are to our friends, what would we say to a friend having this experience? It's okay. You're okay. You'll get through this. You're having a moment. This isn't who you are. These are sensations that you're having, nothing more. Yes, albeit, extraordinarily uncomfortable, but sensations, and that's all not, it's just not who you are, and just being so wonderfully supportive. And it's like when you can bring those principles in, the shoulders can come down a little bit, the air comes in a little bit easier, and then there can be greater focus on the release of the anxiety. And again, as we were talking about earlier, letting go of those stories and just coming into that heart space of support for self.
Beautiful, beautiful message. And in my work as a medical intuitive healer, one of the things that I look at is your relationship with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what we want, the goal is to have a healthy relationship with our true self. And what I find is that there's certain relationships with ourselves that aggravate anxiety. So when your relationship with yourself is the interrogator, as you say, why haven't I figured this out yet? I've been dealing with anxiety for decades. Why am I not over this problem yet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the interrogator, and another one is just bullying yourself and just being really mean and nasty. And so I agree with you. You have to look at those self-flagellating behaviors and realize that being nasty to yourself isn't actually helping. It's not going to make your anxiety going to go away. It's going to actually make you feel worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Emily Shapiro, anxiety relief coach, when you're working with people with anxiety, what are some initial steps that you encourage people to take to release the pattern of anxiety?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the wish is that there could be just one thing and do it right away and make it all go away. But there are some things that can be employed immediately, not necessarily very easily, except for this one thing. And you touched on it earlier about drinking water. And just that whole idea of, the body is 60, 70% water. Drink water, stay hydrated, drink water, everyone drink water, it's so important. But what gives me incentive to take in the water is knowing that that water is circulating the messages, of all of our hormones and nutrients throughout our system. And even when we're down just like a cup or two of water in our system, that will increase the cortisol levels. And here we are with anxiety again. So when I know the behind the scenes, the sciencey part of, everyone drink water, that's much more helpful, knowing what's happening in my system. So that's first and foremost, and super easy fix. The other things that I recommend, it's, ideally to eliminate, but if not, just to reduce. And like you were saying before, caffeine and alcohol, sugar, all things that can affect our blood sugar and spike our anxiety. And on the flip side, also everyone, exercise. Here are the 400 reasons why it's important to exercise. But again, in this particular situation, the happy hormones are released that can give us that extra boost to be able to cope with whatever challenge we're having with the anxiety or otherwise. So those are the quick ones.
Oh, absolutely. And many people don't know that when you're dehydrated, that actually literally increases the tension in your nervous system. And it's not just that you're thirsty, it's like there's more tension in your nervous system. And I love your suggestion about exercise, because emotion is supposed to be energy in motion. And a lot of times we just get stuck in our feelings. So I want to also make a comment from my work as a medical intuitive healer. Recently, I was doing a medical intuitive reading with a woman who suffered from anxiety. And I said to her, I mean, someone might say, oh, practice yoga. And I've taught yoga 27 years, love yoga. But for some people, it's too slow. And when they're slowing down or doing restorative yoga, then all their feelings come up and it's too intense from an emotional point of view. So I can remember saying to her as you need to do cross lateral activities with your hands. And this is interesting. So whenever knitting, for example, and you're using both hands, you're turning on both sides of your brain. And when you turn on both sides of your brain, you turn off the anxiety. So I remember saying to her, and I like to joke, I'm like, you're too smart. You're never going to you're never going to have a quiet mind. What you need is to actually put that energy in motion. And I recommended that she experiment with different handcrafts, such as knitting, so that she could have both sides of her brain turned on. And if you study knitting in the brain, knitting actually turns on oxytocin, which is a neurotransmitter that calms you and helps you feel connected, right? So it's important to also recognize that there is no one solution that is right for everyone. So Emily Shapiro, how can we make peace with the discomfort of anxiety? Because it is so uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. And I find that peace really comes from a willingness to be uncomfortable and an acceptance of just knowing this isn't going to be easy at first. Then there's no expectation that you can set yourself up in such a way that you're ready, knowing ahead of time, I'm going to need to exert myself a little bit more, push a little bit more outside the box kind of thing. And to make peace with that and accept it, and to set small goals on a regular basis. I had an experience years ago as I was beginning to come out of my intense situation with anxiety. Again, there's a train theme here. On the subway platform, I was at an express stop where on one side of the platform was an express train and on the other side was a local, and they were both going to my destination. I was with a friend and both doors were open. And should I get on the local train where I know I can get off at every single stop? Or do I push myself a little further outside the box and into some discomfort to get on the express train, knowing that I won't be able to get off at every stop? And I just made that split decision. We got on the express train, and thankfully it's a happy story. It all worked out well. But just that idea of, throughout your day, or to set intentional goals before setting out on the day. Because even though it can be incredibly scary and you can feel very unsure about the outcome, but when you're successful, it's just extraordinary. It's so much growth. It's like just complete joy, and like self-confidence comes back, and such a celebration that like, oh, another notch, I'm getting there. And you just work your way out that way.
Yeah, I can do this.
Yes,
I can
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to reiterate, because in our society, so many people are under the misunderstanding that when you're mentally healthy, that you never feel lonely, that you're never angry, that you're never depressed, that you're never anxious. And I think that this goes back to the compassion that you so eloquently spoke about, that when we hold ourselves in compassion, that we accept that as human beings in this life, we're going to feel all kinds of emotions, including ones that are uncomfortable. And the more that we can hold ourselves in compassion, I'm not feeling really good right now. What is it that I need in this moment? And really tuning into ourselves and using your intuition to ask, what does my soul need? What does my mind need? What do I need emotionally, energetically, physically? But at the same time, accepting that when you're mentally healthy doesn't mean you're never going to feel anxious.
Right.
So
You need that emotion. Yes.
Yeah, it's accepting your edge.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago, I went to Findhorn, which is a community of healers in Scotland. And I remember playing this game. Well, anyway, long story short, there was a gentleman from Ireland, and he decided that because I was from America, I must be rich and my life must have been so easy. And he just really had it out for me all week. He was just saying nasty things to me. And I remember at some point during the week, I went off into the woods and had a panic attack. And my heart was racing. And I remember coming back, and like you said, I was so angry. I was like, I'm on vacation and I had a panic attack. I didn't pay to go on vacation to have a panic attack. And I'll never forget the people running the program said to me, and I'll never forget this. They said, congratulations, you just expanded your ability to handle life.
I love that.
I know. Congratulations. You just expanded your ability to handle life. It's like, okay, so I go off in the woods, have a panic attack for 5 minutes. I come back. I'm still alive. I drive on the interstate. It's uncomfortable, but I get there eventually. And again, we have to hold ourselves with that compassion that Emily Shapiro spoke about. So Emily Shapiro, any final thoughts for our audience about how to heal anxiety naturally?
I think that really the big umbrella and a place where I was at all those years ago is just knowing that it's possible. It can be done. It can feel so overwhelming, so all encompassing. And like, how am I ever going to get through this, shift my life, do the things I want to do the things I need to do, because this just feels so tight around my neck. And I just want to share the notion that is absolutely possible. A beautiful life full of freedom and confidence and peace is available to everyone. It can be done, even for those that feel I'm never going to get there, because I was definitely one of those people, and it is possible.
So Emily Shapiro, thank you for your wonderful life work. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. This is Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Our guest today has been Emily Shapiro, sharing from her soul about how to heal anxiety naturally. You can find out more about Emily Shapiro and her wonderful work at living-beyondwellness.com. And remember, if you've been suffering from anxiety, it is absolutely possible to feel better using natural healing. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.